Hello there, welcome to Relove Guitars. This is Sam here, and just going to introduce you quickly to this thing. This is Dom's very old, well, relatively old Epiphone LP100. That's what he says. Now, if I get these names wrong, please forgive me, and don't get into big arguments about which it is, because it's less important to me than it is to many people out there. So this is a Les Paul copy. It's a bolt-on neck affair, and it's a beautiful red and yellow vintage sunbursty sort of tone, and it's currently making some noise finally. Out of tune. So all the little telltale signs here. We've got strings that are pretty dead, so you can hear them. But it also, when I got it, one of the first things I did was do a stretch test to see how much out of tune it went with a pull on the strings, and it went massively out of tune, and there was still residual stretch in the strings, even though they're clearly very old. So it was nice to be able to just kind of pull all the remainder of that stretch out. And Dom had said in his note to me that he was struggling with tuning, and I can also, so first things first, I guess, is that having residual stretch in the strings after even a year or so, however long they've been on here, isn't going to help. But I can also hear pinging, maybe not on that one now, but there's a bit of pinging on the nut, so that needs tidying up. Okay, so anyway, so this is a lovely old thing. You can see it's got bolt-on neck with a nice old-fashioned style Epiphone plate on the back. It's got reasonable tuners. They're not good, particularly good or bad. Well used fingerboard. The frets are a little bit flattened, but I think they've got enough life on them for a nice little fret level, and needs it. Not too bad though. The action down here is pretty high. I've got the tuner in here with me, but judging by this, I would say, looking at this action, I would say that no doubt there'll be some tuning problems, at least on that low E there. I just get my app tuner down, which isn't the best thing in the universe, but it's workable. If I just show you, let's have a look and see if it's showing any sharpness. I don't know how I can see that. Let's tune it. Right, there's an E. There's an F. I have to really try and get that to play true. Almost not touch it. high. I'll take care of that. Which will make it easier to play, but it will also iron out any possible intonation tuning problems that may be coming from having this too high off the first fret. Everything else about it looks nice. We can give it a good old clean up. We'll get everything off at some point, clean everything up. The nut's been replaced at some point in the past with something else, probably a graphite type thing. I don't know exactly, maybe it's just plastic, I don't know. With this, if I'm going to replace it, if the nut needs replacing, then it would be a bone one in place, but you know, it kind of matches off with the cream bindings, kind of, well, as much as, if not more so than the black. But anyway, it's all in good nick. I like these old things. Works great. So there we go. It's these lovely old dead strings will do nicely as a set of sacrificial strings to go straight into fret leveling and getting the action right. The strap buttons here are a bit all over the place. They've been sort of, I don't know, there's blue tack on there, all manner of things. So they're going to need to come off. Maybe we can just strengthen those up a little bit. The actual strap buttons here, I have to say, I think they've had their day. They're not going to be doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. That's the main thing. Right, so let's have a little look. I do like this. Well, there's only one of those rubber things anyway, and that one's moving as well. So here we have it. Nice Epiphone Gibson. There's no reason why this shouldn't scrub up deliciously. I'm going to put hybrid 9s on it. It needs a good clean. I say probably a little bit of fret leveling, but then a bit of re-profiling as well, reshaping, recrowning. There's a bit of wear on the top of these frets, some grooves from a nice old, I've been playing a long time. So everything looking sort of good and standard, but it should polish up nicely. And being a bolt-on neck, my experience of these is that they respond really well to truss rod adjustments, so that at the end of it, unlike a Les Paul heavyweight Les Paul copy with a set neck, this is just much less wood kind of trapped in the neck pocket, and it's not glued to a massive wall of mahogany either. So when you make an adjustment on the truss rod on these things, it generally does what you ask it to, which makes things a lot easier. So with that in mind, one of the first things I'll do is take off the truss rod cover. It's a little temporary thing. I'll take off the cover and make sure the truss rod works shortly. Quite a small spacing. The string spacing down here is deliberately quite tight, so it feels like a smaller guitar than it actually is. Makes you feel. I'd actually played one of these earlier on, just after playing a bass, and it just seemed impossibly small to play. But yeah, there's a lot of real estate on the neck here that isn't being used, which could be used for a wider spread, but it's perfectly adequate. Okay, so there we have it. We'll find out shortly if the truss rod works or doesn't work, but I guess the first thing I'm going to quickly look at is what we've got in the way of playing action. I'll make a note of these things. So currently we've got, that is about just 2.25 I would say. Low E 2.25 on the last fret, high E 1.6. Okay, and then presumably some spread after that, and that's dictated by the preset radius on the Tunematic bridge, which is a bit annoying because it's pretty bog standard and you can't really do anything to them. But so I'm going to make a little adjustment here. I'm going to see what happens when we go down to a desired playing action. Right, that's even too high still. That's nearly 2. Let's drive it in a bit further. Let's go for a straight 1.5, 1.5, and let's go for 1.2 at this end, which is not there. Now we expect to hear some problems now. That's a bit, is that too low? Yeah, it's a tad low, it's 1. Okay, so just as a starter, I'm going to get an E or an A, as it happens to be. Okay, so that's the action. Put a bit lower. Let's see what happens to the frets. I'm going to make a note of a couple of these just for reference sake. It's quite nice. So it's 14th G, G 14th fret. Some of the just the really obvious ones. E 15th, high E 15th, G on the 14th. A on the 14th as well. There's a little cluster of things around the same place. So obviously that's going to need some fret work as things are currently set. But what I don't know yet is what's happening with the truss rod. What there is in the way of relief. There is some, but not a lot. A quick close-up look. Maybe as much as is needed. Interesting. Feels like there's more down this end than the other one, but it's about 0.15. So it's not none, it's okay for now. But the gaps here, I'm going to make a little note of these. So we'll go low E, A, D, G, B, E, and just going to approximate first fret action. Going to leave the relief as it is. Now I think this is about 0.5, a bit more, 0.6. It's just on the border of, for me, this is just on the border of causing intonation problems when you play down at that end. No, it's 0.5, let's call it 0.5, not 0.5. Just on 0.5. And more or less, don't know, let's try 0.4 on the next one. No, 0.5. So I think they've probably all a 0.45, let's call that. All around about the 0.5 mark, I'd guess. This the G is lower. I think G is more like 0.3. .35. There's a range of things so far. 0.35. B is 0.4, I'd say. Well, maybe a bit more, 0.45. Just on the 0.5. And E looks a bit higher again. Yeah, that'd be 0.6 probably. Highest of all. I can get there. Good old fashioned feeler gauges, cheap and cheerful. No, it could even be 0.7. So that E is up in the territory of giving you where has it gone? Giving you intonation problems, I would say. I can actually get to 0.7. 0.65. Alright, yeah, so the E is in the territory of intonation issue that I would suggest. So that's got to come down, but all that will happen when we bring that action down is that the guitar will feel easier to play than it was, although the differences or the amounts are tiny. The guitar will feel easier to play, and it will also then cure possible intonation problems when you play. Tendency for that note to play high because you're pressing quite a long way down to get it to fret on the first fret. So they're all higher than I'd like, but they're all high enough for me to take them all down to 0.3, which when you consider we take a little bit of material off the frets as well, means that we're going to end up with an action that is still going to be about 0.35 over the first fret. Now what I'm going to do, just quickly before I get stuck into anything else, I'm just going to slacken these off a bit. I'm leaving all the cleaning till a little bit later because the first thing I do is get the action at the bridge. Ooh, don't know how long these strings will survive, frankly. But leave the action, I set the action at the bridge, check that the relief is how I want it, and then do the nut slots. I mean, that's a bit of a creaky old tuner. Do the nut slots, which I should have just got on to now actually. Well anyway, while I'm at it, I might as well paint up the frets because I'm going to need to have that done. Yeah, so I'll just do the nut slots in a moment to the correct or the ideal depth. And you can have, to be fair, you can have the nut slots anywhere you want. what you'll know is that, we'll find, is that mostly guitars coming out of factories and shops haven't got them set to any particular thing. They're kind of manufactured to a set, the indentations are a set amount, and then the things are placed into a slot that's cut, obviously at the headstock end, and the combination of those two things hopefully adds up to something that's more or less playable. But the reality is it's nowhere near accurate enough to achieve the sort of consistent height over the first fret that I know makes the guitar easy to play in terms of forming chords down this end, and also gets rid of the possible intonation issues. So it's really a small change, but very important one. Now each time I'm doing something, I go to close to tuning, playing pitch as I can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch a hybrid set of strings over here. I'm going to use these as a number guide to the gauge that I'm going to choose for my nut files, because I always go larger. So if the string is going to be a 9, I'm going to kick off with an 11 minimum, and if the 11 says, if it says 11 there, I'm going to go 13 minimum, and if it says 16, I'm going to go 18, or if I've got such a thing. Not often, sometimes I don't. 16 could be a 17, but I'd rather it was 18 or 22 or something. I haven't got such a thing. 17. Well, I'll go with 17. 26, I would go a little bit up, at least to 28. 36, go to 42. And 46, go to 48, which is the largest one I currently have. So the key thing there, of course, is that everything I've gone above the actual specified thing, and I'm doing that because I want the slots to be wider than the actual gauge of the string, and you have to go a long way before it gets too wide, so don't worry about that. Okay, so when I'm doing the nut slots and particularly the, much more importantly, the fret leveling, I want to make sure that the strings are at pitch so that they've got the full tension on them. So I'm going to start with the bottom 3, and I'm going to drop off these 2. I'm going to work on the D string first, and I'll get my gauge set to 3.3 on the metric side, and I'm going to run 0.3 all the way across. And now I think this is 0.45, so it's going to have a little bit of work, but not much. So I'm just going to lift it out of the way, and just a little bit of a cut in there. I'm wiggling it to widen the slot a little bit. And how do I know how much? Well, I just use the gauge. Very close actually. Stop there. Plastic or graphite, whichever this is, I find quite difficult to work these sort of tight tolerances. It's a bit unpredictable. It'll go, you'll start cutting it and then it'll jump and it'll suddenly be done, or it'll be too far done. And when you're talking about such tiny amounts, it's quite easy to go past the point a bit too quickly. So you have to be careful. This was 0.5, now we're going hopefully down to 0.3. Just check it again. like say it's ringing clearly, that means there's still some distance to go. So I'm cutting slightly back at a slant, and it's still playing free. So you just know to stop when it starts to touch the feeler gauge, and you know you're at or close to the target point 3. And if it rings cleanly like that, you still have a little way to go. And it's quite important that your technique's relatively consistent, because it's quite easy to drop down quite a lot very quickly if you change the angle. It's really repetitive and slow, but it's how you get there. Any more extreme cutting movements and you can be too far too fast. So it's taken quite a while. This is quite hard plastic. This stuff is cutting quite slowly. Getting there. Wow. I'm going to stop there, it's very, very close, almost imperceptibly. Now this will be changing the overall action as well, so at this point the guitar may get even harder to play. But once I've set this the way I want it, then the game is to make the frets underneath work with the action that we've set. And it's kind of forcing the neck into compliance. And it's usually the other way round. It's usually that you have to comply with the action that the uneven frets dictates to you, and you don't have the choice. Here we're telling the guitar or telling the neck what we want, and we're going to then make the neck level the frets until the neck does what we tell it and plays with the action that we've chosen. So that's the aim of this. So once I've done the fret leveling, then I can remove the neck, do anything I want, clean the whole guitar up, which often is a nice thing to be able to do with this. Take it apart, give it a good check over, clean everything, put everything back together. And the nice thing about doing the fret leveling with the neck, with the strings on, is that once we reassemble the neck and restring it, it'll behave the same. Once we load it with strings again, it will come back into the same configuration and we'll get the fret level back. It's really nice, dependable technique. And in the meantime, we can take it all apart, do what we want, and it will still come back to the same setup that we had at the end of this fret leveling process. Okay, we're just on there. So that's the bottom 3 done. I'm going to push those out of the way, and then we're going to now the reason if you're doing this, you need to cut your nut slots at as much tension as possible, is to make sure that the string sits fully into the slot, because it's very easy for it to confuse you and pretend it's in the slot, but actually it can sit just proud of the slot and then catch you out. Okay, this is barely above 3, so I'm going to hardly touch this to make it come into play. And actually really all I'm doing there is just widening the slot a bit. Just on. Don't need to go anywhere other than that. Okay, these are getting a bit old now. I'll probably due a new set at some point. 50 quid a time. It's not cheap, but they are a good investment if you do this sort of work a lot. Okay. Yeah, definitely worth it if you do. Most people I know who are into guitars have several guitars. So, you know, you say, well, 50 quid for a set of files, and you think to yourself, well, okay, but I've got 8 guitars, let's say. You know, divide that by 8. Divide that by 8 and it's X amount, or whatever the maths is. And you, it doesn't really work out that much per guitar. It makes sense if you know the scale of the transformation it actually makes to the way your guitar plays. Then the sort of maths just makes total sense, because it's a tiny amount to pay for such a profound improvement in playing. So it's taking a little while to get there on this one. We'll get there. The amounts of the distances we're talking about here are microscopic, really, and it's very easy to run past. I'm going to stop there, I think. Easy to run past the point if you're not careful. But you know, I always say that if it costs you a nut in the process of improving your guitar, a 4 quid nut, or you know, you have to re-shim it or something, that's no big deal. Okay, this is the highest one of the lot, so this will take a little bit of work. Levering it off the side and looking at an 11 gauge for a 9 string when we restring it. You can see the shadow over the feeler gauge. I caught my finger. You can see the shadow, so you know there's an air gap basically. It's quite easy to follow it visually. Nearly there, not far off. This nut is technically too small for this neck, and that's what I'm noticing. I guess it may have been put on by choice. Dom may have put it on, but it's a smaller. It's like a 42 or something. Maybe slightly smaller. Anyway, it gives a smaller grouping, and that's presumably how he likes it. Creates a little bit of a ledge or step. Okay, we're almost there. I've worn a bit all of the black off the first couple of frets now from doing this, but I'll just colour it again. I'm going to stop on that, it's very close. Just you can see visually. Right, so that is my version of my setup, ready for forcing the neck now to comply. So what it means is we've got our guitar with a nice low action at both ends now, with a little bit of relief in the neck, not too much, and altogether we want this to play because it's really nice and low, should play and sound great, but we know that the uneven frets underneath this aren't going to permit it. So I'm going to come back to this tomorrow, do the fret leveling, and as soon as that's done, clean up the fingerboard, take everything apart, give everything a really nice clean, check everything over, put it back together again, and we'll be ready to complete the setup. There you go. What I didn't realise is one press of the button and this thing comes on. Anyway, but it doesn't come on immediately, you have to wait a few seconds. So here it is, it's Sunday morning, and it is Dom's Epiphone LP100, and interestingly, I was looking around this morning. I saw one of these for sale on it might have been eBay, but it might have been somewhere else, but anyway, and yeah, it seems quite well respected old model, and it's Korean made, sort of 80s. I can't remember what the year was exactly, but yeah, nice old thing. So here we are, ready to fret level, and I just took out a few different things here because I've got a variety of fret leveling truss rods to hand, and I've tried loads of different ones, and I've come down to one that I prefer to use, and it's this one. Even though it's not quite the full length of the fretboard, well, actually it gets all but one frets, but I've bought this one in other previous times, and it's great because it's stiff and it's very easy to you know, adjust and fix the bend, which this one it also is. These two are quite stiff, but this one's wider, and I'm not too keen on how wide it is because I like to do it in thin strips. There's a reason for that, not just a preference. Then I bought a base one the other day, which again is great for the length, but is actually harder to control the bend, partly because of the way the thread mechanism here is not very precise. This one is a different kind of thread. It's a finer thread, and you can make much finer adjustments, which suits me absolutely fine. Then I bought another one which was slightly longer than this one, my favourite, just to try it so it would cover all the frets at once. But again, this shares the same thread mechanism as the base one, maybe from the same supplier, I can't remember. But again, it's a little bit, I don't know if you can see it, it's a little bit crude, and there's almost no adjustment at all before it kicks off. But then it's a bit more flexible. So what we've got here is a balance of the rod is very thick on this, which is great. The rod isn't. No, the rod is very thick. The bar is actually a little bit thinner than the diameter of the bar, whereas these, the rod is actually thinner. Or well, it's for its length, it's comparatively thin. Anyway, so the point is, despite trying lots of different ones, I'm coming back to this one, which has weight, which is great. No pun intended, but the weight is really good because of the thickness of the rod, and it has the stiffness, which is also really good. So here we go. I've set this up ready for doing fret leveling, and what I first have to do is tune the truss rod to match the curve in the neck, and for that I'm going to need a Allen key. Can do it by finger pressure, but this one works better with an Allen key. So the first thing I do is I place it on here on the three little feet, which I've put in a marked sequence so I know where they are for each time I recalibrate as I come across the neck this way. It saves me having to try and judge the positioning of these little feet. So I'm just turn it until I run out of adjustment, but actually that's enough already. So we are just at the correct point, and I slack it off a little bit because I'm hitting the middle first. Some steam engine going down the road, traction engine. Wow, okay, so there we are, we're straight away onto the right curve, and that means to do this I'm going to take off the string to the side. Going to use my little plastic, it's actually an electrical connector block, just going to use that to spread the strings apart, and then I'm going to let this ride across the frets with pretty much just with gravity, and it will show where it cuts. It's clonking because it's not quite long enough, so it jumps over the last fret, or jumps up onto the last fret, I suppose. So it's guaranteed to make a little clonking noise, but we can live with that. So just gently to begin with, I'm letting this thing work on the frets, and I'll stop after a bit. This is 400 grit, so it's very, very fine. It's just working under the pressure of gravity, really. And so what I do is pretty much as soon as I start going, I tend to stop and have a look. It's sort of diagnostic, so I can see that it's cutting here, here, none there, some here, a little bit there, some here, not much, some, not much, some, none, 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 some, a little bit, none. So the first thing I can see is that the high frets are showing up because they're immediately cutting. As a diagnostic, if I get cutting at this end and this end but none in the middle, then it makes sense for me to do what I'm going to do now, just to check, is to, before I go any further, recalibrate the curve to make sure I've got it right, because if it's cutting just at the ends, it may be that the tool isn't curved enough. So you can never adjust it too many times. It's so precise and so important to get it right. So I'll go back, if that's what I'm seeing, I'll go back, and actually I think there is a little bit more room for curvature in there, so I'll just add a little bit more in. This is so absolutely fine that it's very easy for it to move even while you're using it, just a tiny fraction. We're nearly there, so you have to handle this thing quite delicately while you're doing this work. Once you've got it, then you want to put it down very gently so it doesn't change its. Okay, that's good. So that was giving you a sense, but it wasn't really that far off because it's cutting in the middle as well as the ends. Equally, if it cuts in the middle and not the ends, it might be it's too curved. But there's never any harm to recalibrate to be sure, and if you're new to it, the more you recalibrate, the more accurate you're going to be, and the more experience you're going to get in setting it right for this neck. So I'm just again letting the gravity really do most of the work. This truss rod has a fair bit of weight to it, so there's enough gravity to let it cut away. And we are seeing some flat frets here, or low frets in this mix, so hence they're not showing up as cutting at all. And that's the challenge really, because I'll just go a bit to the edges. The thing about your levelness of your frets, it's not an absolute thing, it's relative. So that, let's say we had 20 frets all at the same level, but one really low one, then that low one makes all the other ones high, if you see what I'm saying. So you have to end up leveling, taking into account your lowest common denominator. Okay, so I know I made a record here that on the 15th fret, and I can see it here, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, well sorry, it was around the 14th, 15th and 16th. I can see these two frets here were significantly high, so that was what would have been causing the choking. So the way to test now, which is great about this method, because if you'd taken the strings off, taken the neck off and flattened it and done it with a block or a leveling beam, you couldn't do this test. And this test, a little bit more there. Right, it's playing there now, but it wasn't before, so we've got a little bit more to do. But the nice thing about this method is that you can hear it as you progressively free up the choked off note. And the nice thing about that is, of course, it's not just a nice pleasant thing to have. It means that you can stop cutting the frets at the point at which you've made it play for the action that you've chosen. And the beauty of that is you don't end up taking more off the guitar, off the frets, than you need to achieve the action you want. And that's the most, it's the way you're going to best preserve the fret life. If you do it with the flat leveling method, where you take the neck off and you just basically level it until your fret rocker, for example, doesn't make any more clicking, then yeah, that's great. You've got 100% leveled frets. There are problems with that as well, which I'll come on to in a minute. But yes, to begin with, you've got a nominally or notionally leveled fretboard, but you've probably taken off loads more fret life. There you go, we're free. You've taken off loads more fret life than you needed to. So just to, let's use the close-up on this for a minute. I want you to see, if you're trying this method at home, I want you to see what this looks like close up. Okay, so we were cutting everywhere along the fretboard. You can see it looks quite extreme. You can see flat spots. I mean, these frets were pretty flat to begin with, I have to say, but you can see that it's cut. You can see the dust as well, so if I put my finger on it, oh, my fingers are dirty anyway, but you can probably make out the dust, on the metal dust on the side where it's cut most. That's a good indicator. But we've got quite a bit of cutting, certainly on the 2nd fret, hardly any on the 3rd, a little bit on the 4th, none, hardly any on the 5th, a fair bit on the 6th, less on the 7th, lots on the 8th, lots on the 9th, a bit less on the 10th, loads on the 11th, a bit on the 12th, bit 13, quite a lot on the 14, quite a lot on 16, in fact the worst one on 16, and that's the one that you can see is causing all these problems here. I've counted wrong, it was in a hurry, but it's the 16th fret that's the one that's causing all these problems really. And you can see that, how flat that has to be to bring it down to play with the action that we've chosen down here. So you can see straight away, just in dealing with the E track, the E string track, and I've obviously gone side to side on the E string. I haven't just kept it right down the middle. We're bearing in mind that we're dealing with the whole of the space between the edge of the fret here and where it joins the B track, if you like. So it's a bit organic. You have to, you're cutting the whole area. As you can see, my cut has covered that whole space. But that's the point at which we've reached the point at which the guitar is playing, and those notes that were choked off before are now free, because particularly all the way because of the leveling of all the frets, but particularly curing the ones that were a problem. Now my back hurts. All of these frets being flat, and these are both quite significant actually, but all of these being flat, that's going to take some rounding off efforts, and we have to do that's the recrowning process, and it turns the fret from a nice low thing. I'll draw this on the thingy. So let's say we had some frets, one, and let's say we had a really high one, and then we had a normal one. What we've done is we've kind of cut off the high spot on one of these frets. Always make a mess of that. So we've cut the fret high spot off, but we've got a nice flat spot on top now. What we have to do to make this fret play properly, and this applies to all of them, is without taking that height down any further there, we have to reshape this fret within the limits of its height so that it matches the others. And that's what the recrowning process does, and we get a file which is shaped like that to do it. And we bring that down on top of the fret, and we run up and down across the fret, or long ways on the fret, and it takes off the sharp edges here. It doesn't take any off the top, and we'll show you how we know that a bit later on, but it takes off the edges and it reshapes the fret to a nice arch form. Some people, in fact, just recently I've seen a few guitars come through where people have clearly leveled the frets, and some very aggressively, steam engine, but they haven't re-crowned or reprofiled them. So the result is that they've just been polished in that condition there, which messes up the intonation probably by as much as a millimetre on some of the really flat frets. So it's not insignificant if you're trying to get your intonation correct, because it moves the intonation point. That's a not real term, but it moves the point, or it changes the length, the string playing length, by anything up to a millimetre. It moves it closer to the bridge, basically. The flatter it is, it's closer to the bridge it is, and that can mess up the intonation. It isn't huge, but it's, it's not good. The worst thing about having it flat like that is that it's just not as comfortable to play, and it messes the intonation up. Okay, so that was the first one. Now, because I where I took the reading from, I'm going to use the same setting for the B string. So I'm just going to pull that sideways and spread the string down the bottom here with a spacer as much as I can. At this stage, these are sacrificial old strings, and there's every chance that they're going to break while I'm doing this, so I just have to be conscious of that. And I have some spares. Actually, I probably have loads of E's now, but no, loads of E's, man, but no B's. B's are in short supply. But anyway, but I'd have to sacrifice another set for spares. Anyway, so I'm moving on to the B track, and I'm conscious, the reason I'm holding this is I'm conscious of the you see the positioning of the truss rod. It's running right up to where the B slot is, so I'm just kind of making sure it stays central, but I'm also moving it deliberately across from side to side. I want the truss rod to do its work all the way across that track, but I do know that the very important bit, of course, is to make sure we are getting the B track done. Now, I'm going on memory here of approximately how much it took to get the other notes playing, but you can, if you don't remember how much that was, you can always stop at any point and just recheck, and it doesn't really matter. All you care about you just want them to play cleanly, and there's still a little bit of going on in there. And again, what that sounds like exactly is an experience thing that you'll get to feel the more you do it. It's a sort of just a lack of cleanness of the string note, or of the note produced by that fretted string. The other thing is, most of the time I'd recommend you just let the weight of this rod do its business, because you've got the shape there already. If you press down, you'll kind of deform it a little bit. It's kind of the process is designed to do its job just with repetition as opposed to force. However, it does come a time when you've done it a few times that you do start to sense when you need to put a little bit of extra pressure at one end or another, and it's hard to tell you when that is. It's more intuitive than anything, and you will find yourself intuitively putting that extra bit of pressure on where needed. And a little bit still there. Yeah. This is, I'm just checking again, this is incredibly low at this point. Oh my lord, that is, I don't know what happened there, that's too low. That's sub, I forgot the, help, where's it gone? That's below a millimetre. Sorry, I don't know, it's settled overnight with my adjustments, but I just need to double check this. It's quite often the case that you get the end one right at 1 millimetre, and then sometimes the ones inside of that are too small. So the G and the, sorry, these aren't individual, are they? So the G and the B are a little bit low for my liking. We are dictated to, like I said, by the radius set in the bridge. We don't have individual control, so that's better. And that because of the way the way this is built, this E is slightly, I was going to say it's slightly higher than the other strings. What it means is the actual radius, technically the radius of this bridge on here is not the same as the radius on here. If it were, that height would be consistent all the way across, and it isn't. So at the moment, I originally set it mostly based on the high E, which is now reading 1.5, but the B is reading 1, and so is the G, and then it comes back to the D is 1.25 and the A is 1.35, something like that. So it isn't 1.5 equally all the way across, and that can only be because the actual fret radius in real life is not the same as this bridge, and that's quite often the case. These are kind of a universal setting. It may be manufactured for a 12-inch radius, and you might find that in real life this actual fretboard, after all its 20 so years of life, is now more like 11 or 13 instead of 12. This is organic, that isn't, but they end up being slightly mismatched, and that explains why if I set the bridge height at 1.5 on these, they're actually lower here, and that's what happened. I set them on 1 millimetre here, and as a result, because this isn't the same radius as that went down to about 0.6 of a millimetre, which is too low to be trying to play this kind of guitar. But that problem is a result of a mismatch between those two things. It's quite common. Now the tuning will have gone AWOL. Let me just get that back for a minute. Okay, we shall carry on. Yes, so that's an interesting little observation I'd forgotten about. A little bit more to go, I think, still. Interesting thing, as I tuned up there, the whole issue of tuning is a really important and fascinating one. These tuners on these Epiphones are not what people would consider great quality, but I think it's very important to know that they're, when we say something like those tuners are cheap quality or they aren't great quality, what we mean is, and this one's something wearing out, the washers come out. What we mean about it is that they're kind of grungy to use, so the cheaper they are, the more gritty they are in turning, the more dead spots you might find on them, the less accurate the gearing is, or the less precise the gearing is, so they don't feel as good to operate. And usually the lower the gearing is, or higher, I can't remember what the term is, but it means you have to turn, they're quite crude, so you turn, less of a turn makes a big difference. And what you really want is a better quality tuner with a, you turn much more to get tiny adjustments. That's what you'd want. Nearly there. Everything at this end's clear. It's just a couple of notes down here. Yeah, so the issue with tuners is often people think tuners are the culprits when a guitar won't play in tune, and I have to say it's been my experience that is actually never the case. It's a tuner like this, no matter how cheap it is, even if it's one of those classical guitar style open geared tuners, I've never ever experienced or seen one actually undoing. Okay, so there is no, once you do them up, they're held by gearing. The force required to cause it to spontaneously start turning is more than the string would take. The string would break before it actually started physically turning the screw, the gears on the tuner. And so people who think they're in the know often blame tuners, or the cheapness or the Chineseness of tuners. They blame them for tuning instability, and they're wrong. It isn't to do with that. And the proof will be, when we get this done, this guitar will be perfectly in tune, and it will stay in tune. And it won't be because of the tuners. It will be because we'll stretch out all of the residual slack in the strings, unlike when it came to me. And you'll see how long it takes to do that, or how much effort it required to do that. But also we'll make sure that these slots are perfectly lubricated and perfectly wide enough. And so long as we get that, and so long as we get the residual slack out, and so long as we make sure the intonation, the first fret height down here doesn't cause intonation problems, which we've done, then, okay, I'm going to stop there. Then this guitar will stay in tune no matter how cheap those tuners are. Now, the reason you might want to upgrade them is because they, like I said, they feel gritty, or I can see this one, a couple of them, the plastic bushing is given way, so they're basically knackered, and they will start either not freewheeling, but they'll start rattling because the plastic bush is there to sort of hold the thing under a degree of tension. I'm just recalibrating here, by the way, because I'm moving to the G track, and I can see that this needs a little bit more tweaking. And the interesting thing here is that it doesn't mean that I got it wrong the last time. It means the relief of the neck does change slightly as we cross the radius shape of it, and it's often the case that you can look down a neck and see it's, let's say it might be straight when you look down this edge and you look down this edge and there's a slight curve, and you think, well, how can that be the case? And it's because there are differences between one side and the other in the relief. And so that's what we're doing by retuning. We're not only making sure we got the match of the curve right, which is a good practice anyway, but we're also retuning because we know that the relief is changing as we move across the radius. Or it may well change. It's not always the case, but very often it does. Very slightly, but since this is about precision and the amounts of measurements we're talking about are tiny, then it makes complete sense to readjust to make sure we are as absolutely on the ball accurate as possible. Now we had a real choke on this G string on 14 or I think it's 15 and 17 or 14 and 16, I can't remember now, but up in the same place, so we expect to encounter some issues there. Just kind of, again, based on what we know we've had to do so far, we do a little bit and then we stop. Also, you'll see the amount of cutting on any particular fret changes as we come across the radius as well, because some parts of the fret might be sticking up at the edges and it might be just perfect in the middle, in which case you wouldn't expect to see it cutting. So let's have a listen to G. A little bit of ziz. That was choked off before. So okay, a bit more. The judgment call here has always got to be between the amount of fret life left in an old guitar like this and the action you're seeking. So, you know, I might say, well, I can make any old budget guitar play fantastically well with a low fast action, and that's true, but there comes a point in which if we decide that there isn't enough fret life to begin with, then we're not going to reach the playability that we're after. It's just as simple as that. We can't do it. Or we can do it, but the result is going to be such a low set of frets. And that could be either because we're starting with a very low ground worn out set of frets to begin with, which is kind of the case here. A little bit more. Either because we're starting with worn out frets, as in the case here, and or because there may be individual frets that are really, really high or low, or may have some damage, like if you have a fret with a big chip taken out of it, you have to choose whether you're going to bring all the others down to bottom out that chip, or if it's bad enough and or there's not enough life left in these fellas to allow you to do that, do you solve that problem by removing that one fret and starting again with that one, which means to bring it down to the worn outness of these, you're going to end up taking a hell of a lot off a brand new fret to bring it down. But it may be the only thing you can do, save refretting the whole lot. And if you don't want to do that, then doing one is an option, but you have to accept that you're going to take quite a bit of material off it, particularly if you're going to bring it down to the level of all these other frets that we've currently got on this neck. Now I'm putting a little bit of force into the top of this now, because I know that we've got to get rid of this little bit of zizzing. I would say I'm very finicky about fret height. I don't like it when they go below a certain height because you can't get the sort of sideways string bend. This is still okay. I can feel it, it's not too bad. But hey, tiny bit there now, but we're almost there. This is still okay, but I don't think we'd get more. I wouldn't want to do another fret leveling on this. I would probably be, if it was my guitar and I wanted to keep it as a player, I'd be tempted to refret the next time round. But that's just me, and that's obviously, it's not going to cost me cash like it would cost anyone else, unless you do it yourself, of course. So I'm just putting a little bit of force into the top part here now, just because I know there's a little bit more to take off here, and we should be done by the end of this little run. So you can see that there's quite a lot of cutting going on here to get this to play at a nice low action, but that's why it wouldn't have been at a low action beforehand, because as I said earlier on, most of us have the guitars set an action that's dictated by the condition of the frets. We don't have any choice normally. Okay, I'm good with that. Nice sustain. Yeah, mostly we don't have choice. It's most people will have their guitar, they'll buy a second-hand guitar, and it will either be already set to the lowest possible action before you run into buzzing and choking, or it will, or you will set it to the lowest possible action before you run into buzzing and choking, and in which case it'll usually be higher action than you actually want. Just before we do this one, I don't think I checked on D, or I didn't record anything on D. A little bit there. A little bit on 14. Not much. So just listening to that, you could do that with all the strings, by the way. I just haven't, because I've done it already at the beginning. But listening to that, you kind of sense that we don't need to do too much to this slot, this track, the D track, to make it play. So I'm not going to kind of try and grind this down too far. So that's the nice thing about this process, that you just do as much as it requires to play really well at the action you've chosen, and you don't really go too much beyond that. I think this will be right. So at this point I'm always crossing my fingers, hoping that the strings will hold out. That's fine, you see. So relatively little time spent there, which is good. Yeah, I'm always crossing my fingers that the strings will just hold out to the end of this process, and then we can chuck them in the bin. And when we come around to it, we'll refit some hybrid 9s when we've cleaned everything. But from this point onwards, once I've finished this, we can kind of chuck everything off, take everything apart, clean everything, which is what I always like to do, because it's very satisfying to the OCD in me. Clean everything, put it back together, check everything, and put new strings on, and then it just falls back into place. The thing about this is that, of course, because we're only leveling as far as we need to get the nice low action that we're after, there will be unevenness left in these frets, and that's not, I've never claimed. A little bit more there. Most of that bad stuff has gone right at the top, which is good. Yeah, there will still be, by definition, some unevenness in here. So if you get your fret rocker out, well, first of all, if you flatten the guitar out, it'll read as uneven, I can guarantee you, because you're taking off the compression effects that are currently at play now. And since you play the guitar with strings on and the compression effects are always at play, then this is, to me, makes sense to do it with the effect compression at play on the neck, because it actually does change the position of the frets. So if you were to flatten this neck out and measure it, you'll find it going click, click, click all the way along. If you put it under strung load now and checked it, you'd still find click, click, clicks, because of the simple fact that I'm not going all the way to an absolute level. I'm going only as far as it's required to make it play the way we want, and that's the only way, in my book, you can minimize the amount of fret material you remove in pursuit of a decent low action. And to be honest, since fret material equals guitar life, or certainly life between expensive refrets, then it absolutely makes sense. That's good. It makes sense to use a method that will remove the least amount possible, and that's why I do it this way, amongst other reasons. Okay, so I'm now going to kind of just complete on the low E part of it, and just make sure I kind of roll off the edges a little bit, not too much, but just so that we've kind of not leaving anything high in the picture. But this should, I think, looking at this, I think nothing stood out literally at this end, so I think we should be pretty much there. One of the things this is also doing, as you may have noticed, is it's clearly removing the basic grooves. Not all of them, there's still a little hint of it left, but it's taking away most of the grooving. And the reason I say not all is because I'm not pursuing removal of the grooves as a primary objective. There's not enough fret material really for my liking to allow us to prioritise that. Again, like I said, it's a changing judgment call. If somebody brought a guitar in with massive grooves that were clicking and affecting play, and everything else was fairly level, then of course the grooves become the priority. In this case, they're not, because getting a level set of frets for the playing action we want, that's the priority. And I suppose a byproduct or a secondary bonus is removing the mild grooves that are here, and they're not completely gone, but they'll polish out and you'll hardly notice them, but it's just, I'm treating it as a secondary benefit, not a principal aim. So you can see how the logic goes. And why? Because what's the point? If it doesn't affect play, why would we shed guitar life in pursuit of something that at that stage is just purely a cosmetic thing? It's not. There's no point to it. So that's my logic. My string winder is over there. Okay, so this is the hard work in a way is done. Well, it's not. There's more hard work, but the precision work is largely done. So at this point, I enjoy the process of ditching these dead strings, and I'm going to look at these tuners and see if there's anything we can do to save these knackered bushings. It's just from age. They're so old. Maybe they've been over tightened in the past or something. If I take this off, maybe you've got some charge for a minute. Hey, stay going. I don't know how well you can see this, but under my finger there, you see how the plastic bushing is sticking out. It's come out. It may just go back under if we slacken, and you can see this has been tightened in way too far. Same there, it's caused it to bulge out. So we may be able to adjust that better. Again, it's not functional. It's not malfunctioning currently, but it's eventually they're gonna break off those bits of plastic, and as a result, then you'll have a button on the end that sort of rattles about. There are various reasons why people over tighten these. Sometimes they are because they are rattling, and it does need to be tightened to stop them buzzing or rattling. Other times it's because they've got a tuning issue for other reasons, but they think it's because those heads aren't tightened on properly, and then they can be over tightened in pursuit. And I'm not saying that's what's happened in Dom's case, but it may be that if you're struggling with the tuning on the G previously, you may have kind of over tightened these to try and stabilize it, because until I did a load of setups, I thought the tuners were responsible for holding the guitar in tune. It's kind of logical. I mean, I'm not mocking you for thinking that, if that's what you think, because it's totally logical. Okay, so I'm just, as I take this off, I'm noting that these are pointing towards the back. There's no right way. Lots of people do it in different ways. There are easier and harder ways, that's all I can say. I prefer it the other way around, but I leave it the way that I find it rather than meddle with it. So you can see on this now, this is a really mucky fingerboard. I'm going to have fun taking it all apart, and also the same process giving that grubby fingerboard a good clean. Now I can't find the size of. I'm going to get some more screwdriver bits. Even though I put them in that box there, I tend to sort of lose them. So I'm going to take everything off and do everything separately. And as I take the neck off, the only thing I'm going to be bothered about is making sure that there's, or if there's a shim under there, just make sure I know where it is. If there is a shim holding the neck at a certain angle, then it's important that it goes back in, because we've set it up based on exactly the same. So we want it to be exactly the same. If there isn't any shims, that's fine. If it needed one, we could easily put one in. I'm going to have to shim Jay's Fender Mustang later. This guitar has a bridge. Well, apparently this style of bridge should have thumb wheels, thumb screws here, but it doesn't. This has been kind of riveted, so I don't know whether this is just a kind of fix from something that's broken long ago. But the bottom line is that this guitar doesn't have any up and down adjustment for the bridge, which means I can't use the bridge to set the action. I can use it to set the intonation, because each of these 6 strings has its own kind of backwards forwards barrel, but I can't do anything to set the height, which means I have to shim the neck until I get the height I want, which is a bit mad. But anyway, so I've got shim under there now, and actually it's still too high in action for my liking, so I'm going to need to take this off, re-shim it to get the action done. It's trial and error, or replace the bridge with a unit that has a thumb wheels. Okay, so out come the lovely neck bolts and the plate with a plastic backing. And then here's the point at which the neck comes off. And I'm just looking straight off to see what we've got, and there's no shim, and it's all nice and clean under there. Nice wood. It's interesting to see. I used to wonder why there was a hole there, and I've discovered that when I now make my own guitars, the reason there's a hole there is you want to get through both cavities. You have to go in through the neck pocket like that. So that's what I do. A bit of a homemade rig there, but it works really well. Okay, so I'm just going to put that off to one side for a minute, because while I'm here, I'm going to keep this nut. It's working well. It's a little bit short for this guitar, but it's what Dom knows. If I were to replace it with a nut that fits, quote unquote, just for the sake of it, what would happen is that the amount of difference in the way it feels to play would be quite substantial, even though it would really be a fraction of a millimeter's spacing difference on each string. Our fingers are so sensitive that it would really feel like a difference. So it's not broke, so it's not going to be fixed at this stage. Also, because if I did replace it with a bone nut, then it's looking at a bit of, for me it's a bit of an additional expense. But I think on this guitar the main thing is it would change the colour of it, which again would be just a bit more of a departure away from what Dom sent to me. And I think it's really important. I'm always very conscious of how big the changes are, the tiny changes I make, how big they are, they add up to in terms of the feel of the guitar. And I'm always ahead of the customer in thinking about that, because often people will say, look, here's my favourite gigging guitar, set it up for me, I want it low and fast. Of course I do, who doesn't? Yep, fine. And just like you do it on the videos. And I know that just doing the nut settings changes how it feels. If I were to replace the nut with one with a 1/3 of a millimeter different spacing, it would feel hugely different. And so much so that you might, if you went to gigging with it straight away, you might not know where to put your fingers almost. So that the scale of the difference is tremendous. I haven't used that word in a long time. It's something my parents might have used in the early 70s, had I lived with them. That's another story. Right, I'm just taking these off. I'm going to give everything a clean. This is a really nice fun bit, and usually what I do is I turn off the camera and I go and zone out into some sort of OCD Zen paradise while I clean all this stuff. Often with a toothbrush, which I don't have in here. That's a total oversight at the moment. But I get to clean everything bit by bit, and then I can listen to the radio and you know, whatever, and I don't have to talk, which is quite nice for you and me. So there we have, everything's good nick. The other thing about taking everything off is you can get a really good look at everything and make sure everything's in order, and you can fix any little things that come up. So this neck is ready for a damn good clean, and to facilitate such cleaning, I'll get a bit of cloth and I'll get my favourite trusty petroleum ether, which is a kind of next best thing, or almost exactly the same as, what's that stuff, naphtha. I can't seem to buy that in volume at the moment, it's hard to find. So petroleum ether is the same stuff. I find it slightly different in that it actually evaporates a bit quicker, which that's neither here nor there. It's probably easier to work with actually, but it's just a little bit different from the feel of naphtha. But it does, pretty much does the job. It will take off most stubborn bits of glue from various things. So this is a, you know, a bit of a just a refresh sort of clean up. You know, if you're in the mood, a little bit of scratch remover, a tiny bit, will bring this stuff out like brand new. So the headstock here is nice, but if I'm in the mood, I can put a little dab of number 2. Quite expensive stuff, but tend to end up with loads of number 2, excuse the expression, English people, that means something bad. So just, what I will do with this, but I'll do most of this off camera, just get a little dab of this, the old scratch remover stuff, and we'll just whiz it round here, and it makes such an amazing difference. And it's, you know, a little peanuts in cost and a little bit of time, but again, if you're a kind of perfectionist, OCD type freak like me, you can give this whole neck, I mean that's been about 2 minutes, but you give the whole neck 5 minutes of your time and a quick go, and you can see that's just almost like new. Right now, you know, I'm saying this up front, Dom, so you'll get the guitar back before you see this, but I'm hoping, you know, why not? You get that back and you go, wow, that looks nice, looks great. And again, you do the same for the bit that most people see. If you can ever get some out. This, like I say, it's the number 1 stuff. You get 2 pots of this cleaner, this scratch remover when you buy this kit, and it's about 25 quid. It's not cheap at all, but I tend to use mostly number 1 for the scratches, and this number 2 gets left over for lots of this. And that goes into screw holes and stuff, who cares? That's not the point. The point is that once you do a quick one over, you know, the overall improvement in a tired finish is just wonderful. And it's like T-cut, only don't use T-cut on your guitar, it ruins the finish. I did a test because somebody said, oh, could you use T-cut? And I said, well, I'll give it a try. So I got an old body I was going to put in the burner anyway, and put some T-cut on it. It was awful. Just made this dull, cloudy mess. Anyway, so quick polish up. That's like new. Yeah, I don't know if you can see the light bouncing off that, but obviously, you know, it's easy to get your little air blower out and shoot the stuff out the hole. There you go, or anything else that's left in the tuner holes. But that's a beautiful freshen up, and I'm going to do that to the body and the back of the neck and everything. So just a few minutes of time, and you get a really brand new looking finish. Why not? So the same, I'll do that with, I won't use the shining cream with these things, but I'm going to use the petroleum ether. So coming backwards to this stuff, you should really use gloves in that it kind of wears your fingers out, but it dries your fingers out actually, like it dries the neck out. It removes the grease, yes, which is good. So you get this sort of fresh new fingerboard feel, but it also will tend to remove the grease out of your fingers, and you get these sort of white looking, it's freezing them and removing grease at the same time, so it's probably not that good for you. And what I also find is that it also kind of pulls back your fingernails, so you end up with quite a large gap that can be quite painful after a while. It sounds gruesome, but it's not really as bad as it sounds. So I do this on everyone's guitars because it's nice to kind of refresh it. So if it's your guitar, you get it back feeling rejuvenated, like it's been in the spa, not the shop, but been in a health spa. And if it's a guitar that I've bought and am selling on, then you know, or you'll see that the guitar you got has had the DNA traces of somebody else largely removed, which is, that's how I prefer it. So I can put my own germs onto it from this point onwards, or you can, that's what I mean. If you're just doing one off and you haven't got any naphtha or petroleum ether, you could use that stuff, lighter fluid of the old Swan Vest. Is it Swan Vest? I don't know whether it's been so long since I smoked, I can't remember, but yeah, lighter fluid. Young people go, what's a lighter? It's funny, isn't it? There is going to be a time where that's the case. Dad, what's a lighter? Well, son. And I say, what do people mean, have you got a light? Yeah, I've got one on my phone. No. No, son, a light is where you'd accost total strangers in the middle of a city centre, and you'd try and guess who was the smokers, and then you'd go and say, excuse me mate, have you got a light please? And fellow smoker would look at you with that recognition and pull out their lighter or their matches or whatever, and you take the eternal flame and you sort of separate, knowing that you'd shared a moment of the eternal flame with another afflicted smoker. Sorry if you're a smoker, but what a horrible trap to have been in all those years. I mean, don't get me wrong, I could imagine, in my head, I could imagine enjoying a cigarette anytime, anywhere. It's very powerful in many ways still, but I wouldn't go back into that imprisonment if you paid me. Crazy. I mean, these days it's easy, quote unquote. You know, if only there'd been vaping when I was smoking 20, 30 a day, I'm sure I would have eventually, much quicker, gone on to that and done myself ultimately loads less damage, but it's just bizarre, isn't it, what we do. So you can see this is it takes a while. Some people prefer to get the warm water and a toothbrush and maybe the very lightest bit of soap, very liquid or whatever, and give this a sort of rub down or a scrubbing with a toothbrush. But whichever way you choose, what's true is that pretty much anything but pure water will lift the oils out of the neck. And as I restring this, at the point of restringing, I'll add more oil back in. But for the time being I won't, because if I oil it now, it just interferes with my masking the neck off later, or in a minute when I want to re-profile the frets. So I will hold off that bit, so the neck will, for the next period of time, it will look dry. Okay, so degreased, degunked, all your DNA missing for the time being, but the frets now flattened, ready to be reprofiled, and obviously this has got a bit grubby again, but I'll give it a all over shine when I get to the end and it will come up beautiful. So I'm just going to put that out of the way for a second, and I will at this point, very soon I will go off camera. It all works. I'm not going to take the electrics apart, but I will have a look under the covers, just out of pure nosiness, because it's fun while we're here. Let's get the right screwdriver bit. Yeah, it's just why not? Why not look at all the gubbins while you can? Same with Jay's Fender Mustang. What a fantastic, unusual setup these old guitars have got. I love having a peek under the covers, or under the hood, and seeing how the bridge unit works and so on. So this is just purely nosiness. What I will do while I'm at it is I will shoot some air in there, or some contact cleaner, and shoot some air after it to blow out the excess. It's just we might as well while we're here, and if it helps to increase or improve the life expectancy, or how long it plays for, or improve its functioning reliability, then why not? Since we've got the back off and we're just being a bit nosy. I mean, personally, I often do this anyway to check there are no weak fraying wires that are obviously about to come disconnected, because sometimes you can do something, do some setup work on a guitar, and if you know, in transit on the way back, if it gets knocked or something, it can loosen the last straw of a wire that's already on its way out. And the downside of that is that then your customer kind of blames you for it, understandably, because the guitar suddenly cuts out. But you know, you have to spend time trying to troubleshoot with them over the phone, which isn't great for them and not easy to do for me. So it's much better to make sure those things aren't going to rear their heads if possible, and if it only takes a couple of minutes. Like, for example, well, it's not related, but you see this? That's way overdue, needs tightening up. That is going to fail at some point and cause a breakage. So I'm going to take it out and do something. What I quite like to do with these things, around the jack plug particularly, on my guitars I put some thread lock on everything. I'm two minds sometimes whether to do it for other people's guitars, because you kind of need to know it's on there for later if you come to replace them, because you have to just understand that it'll just be a little bit harder to get them off. But the bonus is, of course, that they stay in place and don't fray, and there won't be any short circuitings or breaking of wires. So just looking at this, I want to just check that these contacts are good. They're very dusty, so before I kind of lock it into place I want to make sure it's good. It is. It looks good, so I'm confident of just putting it back in, but then I will make sure that this is fixed in place with a little bit of Loctite, and I would rather have a bit more thread sticking out than less, just so I can get a good fix on this. Because the important bit here is, 1 millimeter extra of stuff sticking out, or permanent fixedness and reliability. And I think, given that wobbling jack plugs are the things that will cause your guitar, they are the things that will break your guitar first. It might as well just make sure they don't move, because movement and electrics just do not go together. So what I'm going to do, there isn't a washer on here, I'm going to find a washer as well. Where a washer is. I can find a washer. Springs? No. Nuts and bolts? Oh, come on. Is it in my box of stuff? Yeah, just my advice would be restrict the movement wherever possible. And I found that if you use something like this Loctite blue stuff, it's going to, will this fit? No. If you can use something like Loctite blue, then what you get is you'll get something that stays put more reliably and longer Let's have a look at this on the outside. Okay, so you can't really see, but I'm going to begin with put a tiny blob of blue Loctite. This is semi-strong stuff. And then I'm going to put the right washer on. No. I'm going to put the thing on first. I should have put the blue on afterwards, but shove that through, put the washer on, and then put the nut on the end, and then I'm going to tighten this all up while it's outside. I do have a tool for doing it while it's on the guitar itself, but I prefer to just hold this now and get this locked together in place, and then the light Loctite will then dry and hold it really firm in place after that. So a fair bit of application, pressure. Just feeling this. Is that good? Yeah. Okay, these are fairly chunky chunky screws, but excuse me, that's what it came with. Back in. And as with all things, sort of go in light and then tighten up as you go along. And that way, if you've got the plate upside down or something, you'll soon find out, because the screws just won't seem like they're going into the right place. Excuse me. So the point here is to, before we've done anything else, is just to ensure that this jack plug doesn't move anywhere from here on. It's the most likely culprit to fail, because if you think about the forces that are acting on it, it's kind of ridiculous. It's why people loop their cable around the strap to try and minimise the amount of pulling to and fro. But even with that, it's still a lot of leverage force on a very inappropriate attachment point. It's not how I would design it, given freehand. Anyway, so that's always going to be the thing that fails. I'm going to take these off because I can. Also because I want to get to the body. These are a bit grungy. If I want to be cheeky, I could put a little bit of grease on these. I've got some. Just taking them off because I want to get close to the surface of the guitar as possible. Oh, okay. Broken. Super glued. Okay, I didn't know about that. Well, that's okay. We can repair that. Let's hope none of the others are broken. That could be. This has been glued on by the looks of it. What things you can't know before you start. Okay, so I've taken that off. We can glue that back together again probably, although I may have a spare one that does. So I'm just, part of the thing here is just to check and make sure these aren't moving. And on my guitars, I would probably blue Loctite these as well, because again, why have stuff that moves if you don't need it? It's only going to cause you trouble. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just taking off all the bits I can to get to the body of the guitar, because I want to clean the body as much of it as I can reach in one go. Get the right screwdriver bit. Yeah, I'll clean as much as I can in one go. And also I want to fix up the strap buttons, because they're wobbling around. See if we can get those a bit filled and a bit stuck down. Just kind of make it more secure, and takes care of loads of little bits and pieces while we can. Okay, so that's interesting. And those two are quite big. So I've got sort of access to a lot of flat surface now, which is great, and I give all this a nice clean. As I say, I'll do it offline. Okay, these have been locked in with something before, so I'm not going to mess with that one. This one's all over the place. It's one of those things you can feel when somebody's used some no more nails or something like that, which is perfectly good to use, but it needs it on this end, but this end's already been done and sometimes what you get out of it is that you've got a little bit of movement on here because you can't really, it's not biting against wood to pull it in, so you end up with the pin that's fixed solid, won't go anywhere like I just experienced with the screwdriver, but you still have this strange sort of slightly loose thing, but it's a characteristic. So just as a quick thing then, you can get your naphtha goo out again, your cleaner, and give it a sort of once over gunge removal, and this alone is a pretty nice cleanup and makes a hell of a difference. And we'll just, on top of this little cleanup, I'll add a little run over, and I will switch the camera off in a second. I just wanted to see how quickly, with a bit of naphtha or petroleum ether, how quickly you can get a refreshed sort of finish. It's really nice to get rid of the residual grease and goo. And everything gets a once over. There's some white paint scuffs on the edge which will disappear as soon as I get the number 2 polish stuff on it. And then I'll do that out of sight. And then what I'll do is I'll put it all together again when it's clean, and then we'll come back for in fact I'll put it together before I do the masking of the neck, because I like to have it all together rather than working on the neck separately. I've taken it apart just for cleaning purposes. Okay, so I'll see you after I've gone off into a trance and cleaned that all up with a bit of polish. See you shortly. Right, we're back. Looking a bit dusty. Right, yeah, we're back. So everything, well, mostly back together. Now is the time to get on and do the re-crowning. Stay there. The re-crowning or re-profiling of the frets. So to do that, I pull from the grip of the magnets. I like to use magnets. I'm going to use this StewMac tool. Let's just move a couple of these truss rods out of the way. Actually, I need them in a minute for another guitar, but just move them for now. Yes, so I'm going to reshape the flattened frets here. So this is what the re-crowning or re-profiling means. I'm going to use the medium jumbo-y side of it, and basically I'm going to run this tool over the top. Get you in nice and close. I don't know if you can see here. So the tool starts to cut the edges of the flat spot either side, and you can see there's black marker still on top, and the aim is to keep running this down the centre and letting it, this is a diamond coated tool, so letting it do its thing. And what you'll see is as we go over it, the black marker pen line gets thinner and thinner as we're taking more and more of the flattened edge off the fret. And the aim is to keep going until that line is as thin as it possibly can be, but not gone altogether. Because if we can just leave it as a thin black line, what we can say is that we've reshaped the fret but without taking the action down any further. So if I can probably just stop somewhere close to there. Sorry if this is a bit wibbly, it's hard to do something and keep it still. If I stop somewhere close to there, I know that the top is almost untouched, with most of the sharp edges gone, and then with the sandpaper in the next stage it'll be quite easy to smooth that out, and so I'll go on and do the same to the next one. Now these have been quite a lot taken off them, hence you can see a very distinct line of black pen down the middle. If the fret has hardly had any flattening, then the black almost goes straight away and we just stop at the first pass basically, and you may see that a bit further down the line. Sometimes there it's starting to get rid of the black in the middle, so I just concentrate on the end where there's still black, and then the other end where there's still black. You know, the more fret work we've had to do, or the more levelling we've had to do, the longer this part of the process will take. You can see also as we do that, the darker patches there and there, that's where some of the residual dents or the wear on the frets are showing up, and we can keep an eye on those as we're polishing out with sandpaper and make sure we kind of clean those as we go. Usually at this stage they're probably just light enough now for the sandpaper to pick it up and sort of iron it out. So there we are. See, I'm going to stop and save you from the boredom, but it takes quite some time. We'll go all the way along these frets with this, and then what I'll do is once that's done, I'm going to run a set of different grades of sandpaper from 6, 8, in this case 6, 8, 1000, 1200, and then we'll move to micromesh up to 12,000, and that will polish the frets up. Once the frets are polished, I'll give it an overall clean again because it will be dusty from the fret material, and then we'll put the strings on and we'll be into the final bits of the action, but most importantly taking the stretch out of the strings so that the thing plays and stays in tune. Okay, so I will come back to you when all that's done. It'll be about 45 minutes in real time from now, but I'll see you when it's done. Okay, so look, we are stretching the strings. Okay, so fingers and thumbs. Oh look, it's got dark. Blimey. Yeah, I've been fighting with that Mustang there since earlier on. Not an easy creature to make play well. Still not quite there, and one of the tuners snapped as well, which doesn't help. So we've got some work to do. I'm stretching out these strings because I want to make sure that all the stretch is gone. What am I doing? I'm just going to get a note first, what I do. I hate it when it goes ping in any way, shape or form. In cleaning this with the polishing gel cream, it's shown up some scratches that I couldn't see before, so I've touched a couple of those up with vintage cherry lacquer, but I forgot that's sometimes what you get when you clean old paintwork. It reveals more damage than was kind of hidden before, really. So this guitar straight away is so much easier to play or to work on than that Mustang. So we'll get some more stretchings going. You want to just do this until there is no more detuning going on, even with the biggest bends. So it's the first time I've been able to have a feel of this since doing the fret leveling, so it's a good time to assess how it feels. Since we've taken a bit more material off the frets. Very nice. We can also connect it up. I'll do a bit more stretching first, but then we can hook it up to an amp and check the intonation. So just trying to get as much out of these strings as possible without snapping any. Yeah, it's been a real struggle, that old Mustang. I finally found how the bridge works, which is a bit of a revelation. There's a tiny little Allen key grub screw with a hex head on it right down inside the bridge. You have to have a US Imperial style tiny hex key to get to it and do anything with it. So managed to do that. Right, strap. Oh yeah, my famous strap that doesn't hold on very well. Let's get the other one instead. And lead and guitar amp. Right, so that's all that. I did a little bit of resin into that strap button at the top there, and that's set nice and hard now, so that shouldn't be a problem at all. Typical, why wear a hoodie? Because then you can't get a guitar strap over it. Right, bit of check out how it sounds. It sounded good before, just it's more about how it feels now. Oh yeah, plenty of noise. Okay, so a clean tone. Nice, it's playing alright. Bit of grunge. I've done something to my thumb here. When I grab hold of the guitar neck now, it cuts the feeling off. Damn it. Good. order. I'm happy with that. Just going to check the intonation in a minute, and check the intonation, and then we'll be good to go. Just going to bring up this pickup just a fraction. I'll do it the right way, I will. Good. Love it. Very happy with that. Let's just get the tuner up on here and let's have a look at see what the intonation is doing. Okay. Sharp, D slightly sharp. So, oh god, it's a Phillips head. I mean a flat head. And the E is slightly sharp and the D is slightly sharp, which means they need to come back a little bit. Which if I can get to it without making a hell of a noise, I can see that actually. I can see it on the E for certain. But you know, you have to get in here in line with the darned strings, or move the strings out of the way, which is such a pain because you really shouldn't have to do that. And drag this fella back, put that on, go through all the hassle of tuning back up, which will now be flat, and it will keep going out flat. Back a tiny bit more. So we're going clockwise, and we're going to just about run out of intonation room there. I know the D's got to go back slightly as well, so it would be good if I could put a bit of a twist on that one as well without damaging the string, which is always the fun part of it. There's a couple of turns on there. Good. to come back a bit still. So if it's sharp, the string's too short, and we need to bring the saddle backwards. If only we could get a grip on it. Stop there. I heard an owl. Those all three are a little bit sharp, so I'm going to bring all of those back a little bit, save you having to listen to that. So the same principle applies. Going to wind them in. Really, just going to slack this off. It's too much hassle to try and do it tight. Don't like doing this. I prefer not to undo and do up strings too often. But with the beautifully, stupidly built Tune-o-matic bridge, you don't really have any choice. So I'm going to pull these back as far as they'll go, really, almost. And try and line them up in a staggered sort of pattern, which should end up with us being fairly close to correct intonation. That's the idea. Every time you select them off, they're going to be out of tune again. Is right, the other two have to come back a bit further. It looks about the way it should be, actually. Come on, back you come. And a bit further back for you, G. G's just about to run out of intonation room. I think it has now run out. on the E, but it's very, very close, and to be honest, I don't want to have to take off the damn bridge and reverse these things, because it's such a bloody pain. Too often you have to do it with tunematic bridges. It's just the way of the world. Trying to just make sure everything's now as stretched out as it can be. Quite like that. Tune and very nicely intonated too. I'm going to have to learn how to hold the guitar differently, because this is not nice. Righty-ho, there you go. Great, well look, that is the Epiphone Les Paul, standard Les Paul LP100, not standard, LP100, playing beautifully, nicely, and all sorted and lovely jubbly. Don't think you'll have any tuning problems with that, Dom. I'm happy with that, so we'll put it away. And I'm not going to send it tomorrow. I'm trying to learn a lesson which is to hang on for an extra day and just let it settle. I've got to put the truss rod cover on there, but yeah, let it settle for a day. In the past, I think it could have been too hasty getting things out the door, wanting to get them back to people after a weekend turnaround, and it's you know, causes me problems sometimes if the truss rod supposedly moves or settles or adjusts or whatever, picks up after the fact. So I'm going to hold on to this for a day, and I'll aim for a Tuesday departure from down here. But yeah, there you go. Thanks for watching on the Epiphone. Simple, lovely bolt-on red vintage cherry, or heritage cherry I think it's called. And it's a beautiful thing. I really like that. It's so simple to play, and I have to say the simplicity of that makes the kind of complexity of that bizarre thing a little bit too much to handle. So I'm going to have to keep on working on that. But anyway, see you soon for another video.